Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a time when jazz floated through the air like steam from a sidewalk vent, and librarians cataloged books not by subject or author, but by scent. You're about to become one of them. This story takes place in the late 1920s, in a city that never quite agreed on whether it was Midwestern or Eastern, where everything smelled faintly of coal, cologne, and ambition. The library where you now stand is a grand old monument to whispered knowledge and soft footsteps. Squeezed tightly between a smoky speakeasy and a cobbler who only works at night, you probably wouldn't survive this job in real life. The air is too dusty, the workplace protections non-existent, and there's a decent chance the roof contains lead. But don't worry, tonight you're just visiting. You won't be asked to shelve anything heavier than a metaphor, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you're listening from somewhere quiet, or even somewhere not so quiet. Drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly soothing to know where everyone else is drifting off down. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin on the front steps of the Chesterwick Public Library. Red brick cathedral to literature, with ivy that appears to be politely holding hands with the stone columns. It's spring, and the streets outside are gently steaming after a warm drizzle. Somewhere, faint jazz spills from a phonograph in a second-story window, weaving its way through the gaslight mist. You push open the great oak doors, and the smell hits you, not sharply, but insistently. A wave of beeswax polish, paper just shy of crumbling, and loudly canned peaches. The scent is not unpleasant, it's just curated. Inside, the ceilings are high enough to vanish into shadow, and the walls are lined with rows of polished wooden shelves that curve ever so slightly, as though the room is gently exhaling. The only sound is the faint brushing of a broom and the distant hiss of radiator steam. At the front desk sits a librarian in a stiff gray blouse with a collar starched to dangerous levels. She glances up at you, then at the small card in your hand. You're here to interview for a position described as olfactory indexer, probationary term. Right on time, she says, without checking the clock. Follow me. You are led down a corridor that narrows with every step, as if designed to gently discourage enthusiasm. At the end is a door labeled in spidery script, **** auxiliary, cataloging sensory division ****. Inside, it's brighter than expected. A window looks out over the courtyard, where pigeons practice their choreography. On the desk sits a curious tray of books, each marked with a different colored ribbon and a tag reading test case. Next to it, a small bottle of smelling salts and a neatly folded handkerchief. You take a seat. Across from you, the head of sensory filing appears. She's wearing velvet gloves and an expression that suggests she's once smelled something truly haunting and never quite recovered. "Let's begin," she murmurs. One by one, she places the books before you. "Describe the scent," she instructs. "But poetically, please." You sniff the first. It smells faintly of peppermint and printer's ink. You say, "A December morning with too much ambition." The second, wood smoke and a touch of vinegar, like someone just burned a love letter. The third, nothing, just dust. You blink. She nods, scribbles something on her pad, and offers you a mint. "You'll do." And just like that, you're hired. No fingerprints, no paperwork, just an empty badge and a lock of your own locker, already smelling faintly of nutmeg. As you're led to your assigned wing, you pass through aisles of silence. Occasionally, you glimpse someone perched atop a ladder or cross-legged between shelves. No one speaks, but several of them nod as you pass, as if aware you'll soon be part of the unspoken pact of the olfactory librarians. Your section is the ambient shelf. It specializes in books whose smell has taken on importance due to their readership, proximity to strange events, or a suspicious number of cinnamon buns consumed nearby. You set down your things, a wool coat, your new notepad, and a pencil that smells faintly like licorice. There's a guide waiting for you, an actual printed manual titled Asterisk Sense of the Chesterwick Collection. 1918 to 1927, a field guide for nasal typists. Asterisk, it has diagrams. It has poetry. Also contains a warning. Greater than do not, under any circumstances. File philosophy texts near the cookbooks. Past incidents have proven confusing. As you flip through your first assigned volume, a 1922 travelogue from Naples, you notice it smells strongly of sun-dried tomatoes. Whether this is intentional or a happy accident is unclear. The note in the margin reads simply, "Traded hands during lunch break." Twice. Historians still wonder if the sensory division actually made the library more efficient. No formal studies were conducted. Some argue it was all a cover for deeper, stranger experiments. Others say it was simply a product of its time and age, when smell still ruled memory and memory still ruled stories. Regardless, you're in it now. You begin sorting with a quiet satisfaction. Tart with undercurrents of basil goes under Mediterranean memoirs. Faintly minty, emotionally British joins the 1890s etiquette manuals. You work slowly, nose hovering delicately above each book, like a court sommelier for forgotten paperbacks. The air is still, but alive, and you, somehow, are perfectly suited to it. You've barely settled into your desk when the bell at the far end of the hall rings a small, shrill ping like a very polite alarm clock, trying not to be rude. That's the signal. Time for your formal interview, part 2. Apparently, the first round was just to make sure you wouldn't faint from glue fumes or insult the Dewey Decimal System, the same velvet-gloved librarian from before. Miss Bartlett's is waiting for you at the top of a spiral staircase. She moves like she's on wheels or possibly wheel-oiled hinges. Without a word, she gestures for you to follow her down, 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 into what's labeled simply as Archives Unstable. You descend 3 floors beneath the main library, into a tunnel that smells like damp optimism and overcooked beans. The walls here are lined with portrait paintings, some not, all featuring people who seem mildly suspicious of your presence. "Here we are," Miss Bartlett murmurs. She opens a door that looks like it should creak dramatically, but, disappointingly, does not. Inside is a round chamber with no windows and one bare bulb swinging slowly overhead, as though it's been waiting for this moment. There's a chair in the center and a table in front of it, holding a covered tray. She nods to the chair. "Please sit. You'll be tested for scent identification, associative memory, and resilience in the face of deeply ambiguous odors." You sit? Of course you sit. You're not entirely sure this isn't a prank. Her gloves are too serious for that. Miss Bartlett removes the cover from the tray. Beneath it, 5 books, 5 small vials of scent samples, and 1 oddly fuzzy lemon. She gestures to the first vial. "Tell me the title of the book this belongs to." You unstop her, the vial, and inhale. It smells like pickled onions and heartbreak. You think for a moment. Regrettable picnics. A memoir. You guess. She blinks once. Correct? She hands you the second one. This one smells like cedarwood, old leather, and something very faintly judgmental. You close your eyes and murmur, probably the collected sermons of Reverend Belby. She smiles just barely. The third vial is confusing. It smells like strawberries and betrayal. You take a wild guess. Jane Eyre. 3rd edition, annotated by someone recently dumped. A pause. Miss Bartlett nods. Close enough. Then comes the final test. The lemon. She hands it to you without explanation. You give it a sniff. It doesn't smell like anything except lemon, which is deeply disappointing. But wait, there's something else. A whisper of tobacco, a tinge of ink. You raise your eyebrows. This isn't a lemon at all, it's a hollow shell, filled with book scrapings and pipe smoke. Someone hollowed this out and used it as a mobile book safe. You ask. Miss Bartlett looks almost proud. Yes, former employee, got too attached. To the travel section, she makes a note. Congratulations, you passed. Your nose is sound, your instincts theatrical, and you don't flinch around mystery fruit. You may officially begin. You're not sure what you thought a second interview would look like, but this was probably better than having to write a 10-page essay on card catalog maintenance. As you walk back upstairs, pee past the staff. Break room, where someone is playing ragtime quietly on a harmonium and stirring sugar into their tea with a pencil. They nod to you. You nod back. It seems you've been accepted into their strange, silent society. When you return to your desk, you find a new stack of books labeled miscellaneous. Too weird for normal filing. The first one is a guide to ballroom dancing for left-footed people. The second is a cookbook for uncooperative vegetables. You sniff each one, assign them a place. The ballroom book smells like floor polish and regret. The vegetable book is carrots and passive aggression. Time drifts gently by, like paper floating on a warm breeze. You work in a haze of cinnamon, cedar, and damp wool, pausing only when the clock tower chimes, which it often does out of sync with actual time. The bell, some say, is haunted by a librarian who refused to retire as the afternoon light shifts through the leaded glass windows. Miss Bartlett glides past your desk and drops off a folder. Inside is your official sensory filing orientation guide, complete with hand-drawn maps of scent zones in the building, a list of restricted aromas, anything that smells like rhubarb is banned, and a glossary of scent-based descriptors. One page is labeled the 9 classifications of book. Smell. Sweet, often nostalgic. Childhood books, romantic fiction, anything with a plot involving cake. Sharp political pamphlets. Early manifestos, bad poetry about trains, earthy gardening manuals. Folklore collections, boots on the ground. Travel guides. Bitter. Legal documents, etiquette books. And memoirs of unpleasant holidays. Savory cookbooks, of course, but also espionage, thrillers, and anything about soup. Floral, self-explanatory. Also includes books that use too many adjectives. Woody adventure novels and memoirs of lumberjacks. Real or imagined. Musty, age-related. Often confused with earthy, but carries more secrets. Indescribable, the catch-all for books that simply smell like decisions. You gently place the folder in your drawer, alongside your lunch cheddar and chutney sandwich. Your ink pen smells faintly of licorice again, and a folded note that says, in spidery script, "Welcome to the scent side." Historians still debate whether scent-based filing ever caught on outside of Chesterwick. There are rumors of one librarian in Florence who tried it but fainted from overexposure to basil. Others say this was the library's way of making sense of a chaotic collection, or of creating order when nothing else made much sense in the world. Either way, it's your job now. You lean back in your creaky chair. Somewhere in the distance, a kettle whistles, a typewriter dings, and a cat sneezes, probably in the poetry section. You're officially part of the team. On your second full day, the weather is indecisive. Rain spits gently on the library's high-arched windows, then stops, then resumes again as if it forgot it was raining in the first place. The light that filters through is soft and smudged perfect. Whether for sniffing paper and contemplating life choices, when you arrive at your desk, you discover a fresh note folded precisely into the shape of a book spine. It's unsigned, but the handwriting is unmistakably Miss Bartlett's tight loops and dramatic descenders. Come to the attic. Bring the peppermint files and gloves. You do as instructed. The peppermint files, you've learned, are not actual files, but a series of novels written by a mysterious author named JLBT. Each smells unmistakably of peppermint, which is strange because they were printed at different times by different publishers in entirely different parts of the country. They also have nothing to do with peppermint. One is a murder mystery set on an iceberg. Another is about competitive fruit sculpture in 18th century Vienna. You stuff the Beatty books into a cloth satchel and head upstairs. Passing under the brass archway labeled rarely visited spaces and questionable architecture. The stairwell to the attic is narrow and creaky, lined with portraits of librarians who look slightly more alive than they probably should. The wallpaper peels in patterns that look suspiciously like maps of old trade routes. The attic itself is vast and hushed, with a sloped ceiling and windows that let in just enough light to make the dust sparkle dramatically. Miss Bartlett stands near a series of long, low drawers labeled with things like leftover index cards, existential, bird feathers unclaimed, and filing experiments sent Group C. She looks up as you enter. Ah, good. You brought them. You hand her the peppermint-smelling Beatty books. She fans them out on the table, sniffs each one thoughtfully, then gestures to a long, narrow metal drawer labeled The Scent Archive, Unresolved Cases. Inside are glass files, hundreds of them, each marked with dates, call numbers, and little sketches, some of noses, others of, inexplicably, spoons. Miss Bartlett carefully selects a vial and passes it to you. Compare this to Beatty's peppermint. You inhale, it smells like peppermint, a pulso, like a type of ink, no longer in production, and something smoky. A distant fireplace. No cloves. Interesting, she says softly, watching your face. There's a theory that Beatty was one person, or three, possibly working together, using the peppermint scent as a kind of calling card. You blink. Like olfactory branding. She smiles slightly. Exactly. Before marketing teams existed, there were eccentric authors and unregulated printers. As you sift through the books and vials, you start to notice something else. The peppermint is never quite the same. One has notes of vanilla. Another, a hint of citrus. They're like variations on a theme, like someone tuning a familiar melody over time. Historians still debate the true identity of JLBT. Some claim the name was a pseudonym used by various librarians during the 1910s and 20s to smuggle political ideas into fiction. Others say Beatty was Rilla confectioner turned novelist whose only quirk was storing his manuscripts in a peppermint warehouse. The truth, as always, is faintly scented and mostly inconclusive. You and Miss Bartlett work in quiet companionship. She jots notes in a small green book. You line up the vials in gradient order, from faint mint to nose-scorching menthol. A breeze drifts through the attic window, smelling of old leaves and rain-soaked shingles. Then, from a far corner of the attic, a sound, it's not alarming, just rhythmic. A soft thwop-thwop-swap, like someone gently shaking a rug or trying to close a stubborn book. You glance at Miss Bartlett. She sighs. The folios are restless again. She leads you across the attic to a tall stack of oversized books, some nearly as tall as you are. These are the folio's massive art volumes, engineering plans, and illuminated manuscripts that never quite agreed with ordinary shelving. One of them is vibrating slightly, its leather cover twitching like it has something to say. Miss Bartlett gently places a hand on it. This one always reacts to peppermint. No one knows why. Possibly a coincidence. Possibly a grudge. She opens the book. Inside are delicate botanical drawings of mint plants from around the world. That would explain it. She slips a sachet of lavender between the pages and the book settles. Docile once more. You return to your table and record the beady findings in the official scent log. Entry number 1192. Beady volume 4 notes of peppermint, clove, minor. Citrus, possible origin. Albany, 1921. Cover design, Art Deco, teapot. Oddly sticky. Just as you're packing up to return downstairs, you notice a book wedged behind a rafter, wrapped in yellowing paper and bound with twine. You tug it free. It smells. Wrong, not bad. Exactly just confusing. Like old cake and newspaper ink. The tag reads, unfiled. Do not open without supervision. You raise an eyebrow at Miss Bartlett. She glances at the book and murmurs, ah, that one. We don't talk about that one before lunch. Leave it here. You do as you make your way. Back down the staircase, the scents of the attic follow you. Peppermint, cloves, lavender, and whatever that mystery book was trying to be. You emerge into the main floor, blinking at the soft light like someone returning from a dream. You return to your desk, where a new note awaits. This one is in a different hand, written on a napkin, stained with what smells like raspberry tea. Good work today. Tomorrow, the rooftop catalog. You pause. Rooftop. Of course, the library has a rooftop catalog. Why wouldn't it? The next morning, you're prepared. You've packed gloves, a snack to ginger biscuits, and a pear. And your official scent log, which now smells faintly of both peppermint and attic. The note said rooftop catalog, and as it turns out, the entrance is behind a bookshelf labeled ladders, practical and symbolic. You slide the shelf aside, very dramatic, like a spy in corduroy, and discover a narrow iron staircase spiraling upward. The sign at the bottom reads, asterisk rooftop access for filing staff, skywatchers. And the pigeon liaison only. Asterisk as you climb, the air changes. It smells brighter, somehow like dust warmed by sun and something faintly herbal. You pass by windows warped with age, catching crooked glimpses of the rooftops of Chesterwick. Slate tiles, chimney pots, and yes, a pigeon perched nobly on a weather vane, wearing what appears to be a tiny scarf. Finally, you reach a trapdoor. You push it open. The rooftop is a dream from another century. There's a low wall of carved stone lions weathered into sleepy expressions. Between them, trellises of ivy and old wind chimes made from typewriter parts clink gently in the breeze. At the center of the space is a circular filing cabinet made of brass and wood, like a very serious sundial. This is the rooftop catalog. It's not what you expected. The drawers aren't labeled with numbers or letters, but with odd, almost poetic headings. Books read in sunlight. Volumes with crumbs in the spine. Beloved by bees. Faint scent of regret. You open one drawer. Inside, dozens of cards in soft script, each noting a title, author, and a line or two of impressionistic commentary. The Sailing Almanac, 1894, smells of linen and sea salt. Best read while barefoot. Another, collected speeches of the Minister for Shoes' unusual squeaky spine, disliked by pigeons. Filed for sunshine only. Asterisk, you glance uphand. Sure enough, 3 pigeons are watching you. One nods slowly, as if to say, yes, we remember the Minister for Shoes. There's a little reading nook tucked behind a chimney. Stack, padded with cushions that smell like vanilla and slightly singed toast. Someone's left a teacup with a note. Greater than asterisk water, the oregano, if you stay past noon. it gets cranky. Asterisk, you do a slow lap around the rooftop. It's surprisingly peaceful. From up here, the city sounds are muffled, just the hum of trams in the distance. A dog barking, the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby bakery. The library feels like its own little planet. You return to the catalog and begin gently leafing through the cards. One drawer labeled unread but admired contains dozens of entries for books that have never been borrowed but are always dusted. Another, heavily annotated in pencil, contains margin-heavy novels with notes like, "No one should wear this many cravats," and technically not how pickling works. As you examine a drawer labeled books that smell like childhood, a breeze lifts one card and sends it fluttering across the rooftop. You catch it just before it falls over the edge. Greater than Marigold's first dictionary, greater than Asterix smells of jam, patience, and rubber boots. Cover has teeth marks. Asterisk, you make a note to locate that one later. It sounds like it belongs in the earthy sweet section downstairs. After a while, you sit cross-legged by the catalog and just breathe. There's a stillness to this place. You suspect that many of the staff come here when the world below gets too noisy, or when a particularly confusing book smell leaves them doubting their life choices. You pick up a short stack of freshly written cards from a little inbox marked to be filed. These seem to be the work of an anonymous rooftop contributor, possibly the pigeon liaison. The unabridged history of buttons greater than Asterix pages smell faintly of starch and old gossip. One chapter is missing, but no one minds. Greater than how to translate your cat greater than smells like lavender and denial, possibly fictional. Greater than the unwritten cookbook, greater than no recipes, just suggestions. Tastes implied, smells like time and hope. Asterisk, you file them carefully, matching mood to drawer. It's oddly satisfying. Historians have very little documentation about this rooftop catalog. It's whispered about in some archival circles, often dismissed as a myth or a misinterpretation of Victorian ventilation schematics. A few old letters reference the Sunshine Files, but nothing definitive. Still, here it is. Breezy, weird, and absolutely real. Eventually, you notice the time. Your watch has stopped ticking, but the sun tells you it's nearing late morning. A new note has appeared beside the oregano pot, written in the same spidery hand you saw on your first day. Greater than next. Basement B, bring the scarf that smells like nutmeg. You don't own a scarf that smells like nutmeg, yet you gather your things and descend the spiral staircase, the scent of ivy and sun-drenched pages lingering on your sleeves. You pass the typewriter wind chimes again. One of them pings softly as you close the trapdoor behind you. Down below, the library feels dimmer, as if it knows you've been somewhere special. You pass Miss Bartlett in the hall. She raises an eyebrow and murmurs, "Did they tell you about the potato drawer?" You shake your head. She nods solemnly. "Good. Some things must be earned." You head back to your desk, already imagining the smell of nutmeg and basements. Basement B smells like a polite secret, not a dark one, just something shy. The air is cooler here, dense with damp stone, waxed paper, and what might be cinnamon, or mildew pretending to be cinnamon. Either way, it makes your nose twitch, and your feet tread carefully. There's a reason the library's main floor map simply labels this level. Basement B, odd contents. Enter at own pace. You descend the stone steps slowly, trailing one hand along the curved wall. The bricks are irregular, like they were laid by someone who believed in both function and whimsy. The final step groans softly under your foot, like it resents being disturbed. A small lantern flickers into life as you enter. You're greeted by a door labeled in neat copper plate, items misfiled with confidence. Inside, rows of low wooden cabinets, each with mismatched handles and drawer pulls. Someone clearly assembled this filing system using spare parts, determination, and a questionable relationship with measurements. The drawers aren't alphabetized or numbered, but categorized by scent and texture. Crisp, like frosted linen. A hint of shoe polish. Books with a side of soup. You start with a drawer marked *nutmeg adjacent, hoping to uncover the scarf mentioned in the note. Instead, you find a stack of small monographs on historical dancing shoes, 3 pamphlets on the scent profiles of extinct flowers, and a leather-bound volume that smells like a combination of toast and piano benches. No scarf. You try another. Drawer labeled fabric, whispery. Here, a collection of old gloves, a monogrammed handkerchief from a duchess who allegedly invented the concept of coat pockets. And finalia, wool scarf with faint traces of nutmeg, cardamom, and what might be disappointment. Bingo, you loop it loosely around your neck and turn to explore the rest of the basement. This section appears to serve as a resting place for books and objects that were filed with absolute certainty, in absolutely the wrong places, on a shelf marked * comedic misunderstandings. You find a cookbook misfiled under medieval siege. Warfare. It's titled 5 Spices and a Catapult and features a handwritten dedication. For May, your sauces always be bold. Beside it, a stack of political speeches from the 1890s has been labeled Inspirational Picnic Readings. You flip one open and read aloud in your softest indoor voice. And so, with firm resolve and minor indigestion, we march forward into fiscal stability. You gently close the book and put it back where it belongs, exactly nowhere. One corner of the basement is particularly drafty. There, you discover a section labeled * wind-activated literature, which seems to include pop-up books, scrolls, and origami pamphlets that only reveal their contents when a breeze passes through. A small fan has been positioned nearby. When you switch it on, the books rustle open like they're stretching after a nap. Pages flutter to reveal half-told stories, diagrams of forgotten dances, and, curiously, an entire page devoted to historical recipes involving onions and diplomacy. You note it all down. Historians rarely mention basement bees. Some believe it never officially existed. A footnote in an architectural journal from 1931 suggests the original blueprints included only 1 basement, but that a second appeared after an ambitious round of reshelving. Others say Basement B was originally a coal room converted by bored interns in 1908. No one really knows, which makes it perfect. You pass a low alcove labeled * unusual sounds. And sure enough, one of the books hums softly when you brush its spine. Another gives a single, firm plonk, and then goes quiet. You're not sure whether they're enchanted or just opinionated. Eventually, you reach a drawer labeled Smells that defy reason. Inside, a collection of oddities. A cloth bookmark that smells like clean snow. A copy of A Brief History of Umbrellas that emits a faint aroma of metal and limes. And a small tin labeled Open only if you enjoy confusion. You don't open it yet. Instead, you jot down your findings. Entry number 1243. Basement scarf secured. Nutmeg confirmed. Possible cinnamon notes. Strong sense of curiosity. File under soft mischief. On your way out, you spot a narrow door tucked behind a hanging tapestry. There's no label, just a pressed flower pinned to the wood. You hesitate, then, from behind you, a familiar voice. Ah, you found the door. It's Miss Bartlett, appearing from the shadows like someone who's had a lot of practice at it. Technically, that's Basement B prime, she says. Access requires a sense of humor and a working knowledge of fictional filing systems. You blink. I think I qualify. She nods. We'll see. Tomorrow, then. She disappears down a side corridor, her steps quiet as dust. You return to the main floor, scarf tucked around your neck. Brain pleasantly full of odd smells and misfiled memories. The light upstairs feels warmer. You're starting to notice how each section of the library has its own climate. Like continents in a slow-moving paper world. Back at your desk, a final note awaits. This one is on sturdy cardstock and smells like tea with lemon. Take the rest of the day to wander. Listen. The library's always whispering, and so you do. Today begins with a shoe in your mailbox. Not metaphorically literal. Well-polished Oxford sitting atop your correspondence. Inside the shoe, a rolled paper scroll, faintly lemon-scented, tied with a green ribbon. You open it slowly. The message reads, "Congratulations on mastering nutmeg. Your next assignment awaits in the stairs that go sideways. Wear something with pockets. You'll need them." You glance down. No pockets. This is unacceptable. 10 minutes later, you've borrowed a librarian smock with 6 highly suspicious pockets, collected your notes, and returned to the hallway behind the botanical index, where a portrait of a woman in a bonnet seems to wink at you. You wink back, because manners matter. Behind the portrait, a narrow passageway with a sign that reads, "Stairs that go sideways. Contents may shift in transit." The steps are real, if a bit untrustworthy. They angle sharply left, then rise, at a steady incline while drifting ... diagonally. You grab the handrail, which, to be clear, is made of braided jump rope and descend. As you climb, the temperature changes. So does the smell. Peppermint, charcoal, old rain, and something like freshly printed paper. You reach the landing, which opens into a long hallway sloped just enough to make you feel like you're walking uphill sideways. This is the Hall of Unclaimed Systems. Here, the library keeps records of filing methods that never caught on. One wall holds a display titled, "Color-Based Dewey Decimal Alternatives." There are small stacks of books labeled only by shade mauve, burnt umber, thundercloud, cheerful banana. The banana books seem to contain mostly naval adventure stories and mild memoirs of unremarkable pets further along. A glass case contains samples from the asterisk butter-based filing theory, which was briefly tested in the early 1900s. The concept was that books would be shelved according to the consistency of butter they made one imagine. Unsalted history, spreadable romances, and most controversially clarified nonfiction. It was discontinued after 1-2. Many libraries were visited by well-dressed raccoons. You jot down a few notes in your pocket notebook, pocket 3, front, left, sideways staircases, butter files, minor vertigo, strong undertone of whimsy. As you round a corner, you discover a doorway with a bead curtain. A little sign dangles overhead. The whisper shelf, "Please murmur your requests." Inside, low lighting, walls lined with velvet, and a long stretch of shelves filled with books that seem to exude a sort of presence. You approach one and whisper, "Good morning." The book shifts ever so slightly. You whisper again, "Do you know anything about potatoes?" A book slides out halfway. It's titled Starch and Society, A History of Tuber Governance. You open it carefully, and a warm, earthy scent rises to greet you. Mashed potato with a hint of parchment. Pocket 5 receives. A note card, "Talking books prefer kindness. Potatoes equals political." You take a seat near a display labeled Filing by Personal Vibration. Its tones tuning forks and bookmarks that hum faintly when held. One librarian in the 1930s allegedly filed 3,000 volumes using nothing but a wooden dowel and her feelings about tea. Her results were inconsistent, but charming. The hallway gradually flattens and deposits. You in a chamber lined with curious objects, spools of scented thread, taxonomies of hats, a shelf titled books organized by font friendliness, and one locked cabinet simply labeled asterisk too silly. Even for us asterisk, you are sorely tempted. But something else draws your attention. A small drawer tucked beneath a display on filing by weather memory. The label reads, Pocket Artifacts. Inside are small, curious objects left behind by previous staff. A walnut shell carved into a chair. A key with no teeth, a tiny notebook labeled Emergency Haikus, and a folded paper crayon that smells faintly of cinnamon toast. You're encouraged to take one. You choose the haiku notebook. It fits perfectly into pocket. 6. Historians never mention the stairs that go sideways. Perhaps because the blueprints deny its existence, or because anyone who ascends them returns slightly different, quieter. Perhaps, or with a fondness for inexplicably tilting furniture. One journal from 1919 makes a vague reference to the slantwise librarian. But it's unclear whether this is a place or just a very specific personality. You spend another hour exploring the hall. The sound changes here, footsteps echo differently, whispers float oddly. You find a bench that hums in a minor key and sit, letting the peculiar sense of sideways reality soak in at some point. A slip of paper flutters down from a vent above you. It simply says, greater than pocket 4, for memories. You pat pocket 4, which currently holds nothing but lint and a tiny pencil that feels poetic somehow. Eventually, you find the way back. The steps are a bit more trustworthy on the descent, as if they've come to respect your commitment to sideways nonsense at the bottom. A fresh cup of tea waits for you on your desk. The tag says, for clarity with lemon. Do not drink if. Still tilted, you hold the cup. You are, in fact, still slightly tilted, so you file a note instead. Sideways stairs, jelly legs, one potato book. We'll revisit. Eventually, you lean back in your chair. The library settles around you. Somewhere above, the wind rattles the typewriter chimes. Somewhere below, the whisper shelf is probably laughing softly at a new visitor, and somewhere deep, in your pocket, a very small haiku waiting for the perfect moment. The elevator bell sounds like a polite sneeze. You glance up from your desk to see the doors slide open with the hushed confidence of something that's seen things. It's not the usual elevator. This one has velvet wallpaper, a single leather armchair bolted to the floor, and a wall plaque that reads, Department of Scented Correspondence. Appointment suggested, but not required. A slip of paper flutters out of the elevator like a dramatic invitation. You catch it mid-air. It reads, Tea Room 3. Bring the haiku notebook. Wear confidence. You're already standing. The elevator accepts you without judgment, which feels rare these days. You settle into the armchair as it rises not up, exactly, but sideways into what feels like early spring. The air shifts. You smell bergamot, old ink, and something faintly like pencil shavings in a sweater drawer. The doors open to a circular room filled with steam, plants, and the clink of teacups. Tea Room 3 is less a room, more a memory of a garden party held indoors during a brief flirtation with elegance. The furniture is slightly mismatched cushioned chairs from various eras. A chaise lounge that looks like it once belonged to a moderately wealthy poet, and a serving trolley that appears to glide of its own accord. On the trolley, teas organized by emotion, mild regret, sudden realization, triumphant laziness, and a pot labeled simply *Tuesday. You choose triumphant laziness. It smells like toasted oat, a hint of rosemary, and the feeling of finishing. A long list by losing it entirely. You take a seat near a low table covered in envelopes. Each is stamped with an old-fashioned wax seal, a tiny cat asleep in an open book. This is the department of scented correspondence. Miss Bartlett appears from behind a curtain wearing a brooch shaped like a teacup and the expression of someone who's just finished solving a crossword, written in invisible ink. She nods toward the haiku notebook in your lap. Did it write back? You check. It has, on the inside back cover, in ink you don't remember using. Asterisk filed sideways, again greater than memories in pocket, for greater than tea tastes like old jokes, asterisk. You raise your eyebrows. Miss Bartlett smirks. The haiku notebooks only speak to those with odd filing habits, she says. You're progressing nicely. You sip your tea. It tastes warmer than the room, as if infused with good intentions. Today's task, she explains, is to assist with sorting letters by scent. Not content, not date, not sender. Scent, specifically. Emotional scent, what the letter evokes when sniffed by a trained archivist. You're halfway there. You're led to a long table where envelopes are stacked like soft decisions. A brass nameplate reads, "Sort gently, label kindly." Your first letter smells like fresh-cut grass and faint anxiety. You label it nostalgia about doing absolutely nothing. The second smells of mint and confidence asterisk overdue apology with a touch of swagger. Asterisk 1 smells like boiled cabbage and guilt. It gets filed under unexpected honesty from a middle child. You work slowly. The library seems to shift as you sort, breathing with you. The air feels light, like you're inhaling long-forgotten thoughts. At one point, Miss Bartlett brings you a letter in a deep blue envelope. It smells like cloves and chalk. Inside, a single question, handwritten in looping cursive. Greater than if I filed myself under misplaced, would anyone look? You read it twice. Then you file it under philosophy. Probably. Historians don't mention the Department of Scented Correspondence. Or, if they do, it's in passing with a dismissive footnote, possibly apocryphal. T, not verified. But the library's long memory disagrees. There's an entire wall of archived letters, sorted by things no one dares to catalog. First heartbreaks that smelled like library paste. Job offers scented with cold weather, postcards that carried the aroma of places you almost visited. Miss Bartlett gestures for you to follow her to the final task of the day. The envelope of indecision. It's large, slightly singed on one corner. It smells like hesitation and pine. Inside, a map, not of the library, but of scent trails through it. Thin lines drawn in colored ink show where various scents gather, merge, and disappear. Peppermint near the west window. Old leather in the northwest stairwell. Damp lilac in the room with no windows, and faint nutmeg that curls all the way back to basement B. It's a quiet puzzle, one that asks no urgency. You're given a wax stamp of your own Anne. Al, yawning and asked to seal the envelope again. You do, feeling just slightly more permanent than you were this morning. As you return to your desk, the haiku notebook rustles in your pocket. New page. 3 new lines. Greater than letters sorted slow. Greater than envelopes. No more than us. Greater than tea cools. Time wanders you. Look up. The library hums with soft light, distant footsteps, and the vague scent of lavender and possibility. The letter arrives mid-sigh. You're midway through your second cup of overwhelmed but charming tea, contemplating whether alphabetizing your own shoes is a productive use of time, when a tiny envelope parachutes from the ceiling. Its parachute appears to be made from a doily. Of course it is. The envelope reads, "Greater than to whom it may mildly concern, your assistance is requested in room 14 3/4, Department of Unexpected Librarian Tools. Greater than dress accordingly. Bring nothing sharp." You look down at your smock, which has Acquired a faint lemony perfume and exactly 1 biscuit crumb in pocket. 2. It will do. The hallway to room 14 3/4 doesn't appear on any map, but it reveals itself if you hum a scale in reverse. You give it your best effort badly, but with spirit's hand. The wall beside the mop closet slides open with a resigned asterisk, finally. Asterisk inside. Soft lighting, low ceilings, and the distinct scent of beeswax and old metal. Room 14 3/4 is part workshop, part museum, and part extremely specific fantasy. Rows of glass cases line the walls, each displaying one improbable item used at one improbable point in library history. The first case reads, asterisk, asterisk, the bookmark gong, used to summon silent assistants. 1907 to 1910. Asterisk, asterisk, it's a small bronze disc the size of a teacup saucer. The placard explains that librarians would tap it with a thimble to indicate emergencies such as unsorted haiku, missing footnotes, or sudden existential spiral in aisle D. Next, asterisk, asterisk, index finger warmers for winter cataloging. Asterisk, asterisk there. Small knitted sleeves, each bearing initials. Some have tiny bells. You pick one up and immediately understand the appeal. Toasty index fingers mean faster. Cross-referencing, you round a corner into the heart of the room, where the most curious tool of all is being carefully polished by a gray-haired librarian in suspenders and a vest with far too many pens. He introduces himself as Mr. Twill. Careful, he says, not looking up. You're standing in the path of the echo cart. You step aside just in time for a small cart on squeaky wheels to trundle past, gently murmuring last week's overdue book titles in reverse order. It's mostly harmless, says Mr. Twell, unless you owe it money. He shows you today's task, helping catalog and test the asterisk librarian. Devices of questionable efficiency. Asterisk, this is an actual subsection filed just between whimsical stamps and tools that shouldn't have worked but did. You begin with the paragraph compass, a shiny brass device meant to physically align wandering paragraphs in old manuscripts. It hums when pointed north and vibrates slightly near long-winded footnotes. Then there's the asterisk Dewey decoder ring, which seems to generate decimal numbers based on how enthusiastically you whisper the book's title. You test it on asterisk, a short guide to the benefits of being slightly confused. The ring spits out asterisk, asterisk, 629.82, gentle transportation. Asterisk, asterisk, Mr. Twillbeams. That's the kettle hovercraft section. Very underused. You test a few more, asterisk. A set of mood goggles that show book spines in different colors depending on your emotional readiness. Asterisk. A page flipper wand that licks its own tip politely to turn fragile pages. Asterisk. A set of library gloves that allegedly translate marginalia into poetry. One glove writes in iambic pentameter. The other doodles cats. You glance at the clipboard of items to inspect. Halfway down, asterisk, asterisk, the suggestion owl. Asterisk, asterisk, underlined. Twice, you ask Mr. Twill. He sighs and points to a cupboard. Third shelf, behind the books on fish who attended college. Inside, tucked among oddly shaped scrolls, and one alarming feather. Boa is a carved wooden owl with eyes made of blue glass marbles. It wears a tiny hat. Instructions read, greater than to activate. Ask a reference question, then wait. Owl is under no obligation to answer sensibly. You give it a try. What's the best way to sort books on time travel? The owl whirs to life, blinks, and replies in a slow, echoey voice, greater than by publication date. Unless they wrote it before they were born. You try again. Where's the quietest part of the library? The owl hoots once, then says, greater than inside your own thoughts, or under the third floor rug. You nod solemnly. The owl nods back. It's unclear whether it's wise or just bored. But the suggestion owl quickly becomes your favorite librarian tool. You wrap it in a soft towel and carefully place it in pocket 1 for safekeeping. It pecks your notebook gently. In approval, historians sometimes refer to oddities in institutional record keeping, usually followed by accusations of clerical error or whimsical sabotage. But no one really talks about the devices, what they meant, how they worked, or whether they should have been used near caffeine. You spend the rest of the afternoon tinkering. The whisper of typewriter chimes follows you faintly. The room buzzes with invention and just enough nonsense to make it feel believable. As you leave, Mr. Twill hands you a tiny velvet pouch. For emergencies, he says. Inside, a miniature stapler, 3 chocolate buttons, and a folded haiku that reads, greater than asterisk tools with too much heart, greater than file nonsense into sense, greater than owl blinks. Then smiles asterisk, you feel strangely prepared for whatever comes next. You hum the backward scale. The wall opens. You return to your desk with a cart of tools, a deeper understanding of improbable librarian engineering, and a growing suspicion that the suggestion owl is silently judging your tea choice. It blinks once, then closes its eyes, so you do the same. The day begins with a door that wasn't there. Yesterday, it's tucked between the card catalog and the room of alphabetical regrets, which mostly houses dictionaries without tough date slang. And it looks like it's been waiting for you to notice. It painted on the front in careful gold script. Asterisk, asterisk, the hall of misplaced sounds. You gently push it open. Instantly, you're wrapped in a hush-not silence. Exactly, but a soft, padded quiet. Like the inside of a scarf. The hallway beyond is dim and carpeted in an elaborate paisley pattern that looks vaguely like musical notation doing yoga. The air smells of warm cedar, typewriter ribbon, and something like applause at a very small poetry reading. The Hall of Misplaced Sounds is unlike any part of the library you've explored before. Instead of shelves, there are narrow alcoves filled with glass jars. Each is labeled with a brief phrase, sneezes from 1871. Accordion tuning, accidental last page turn of Volume 2 Whale Song. But only on Tuesdays at first. It seems like a museum of audio oddities. But then you realize something. The jars are active. Each one holds its sound like a sleeping cat holds sunlight. Quiet now, but not gone. You pick up a jar labeled Midnight Footsteps on Marble and crack it open slightly. A soft click, clack, ... click echoes briefly around the corridor, like a ghost trying to find the bathroom without waking anyone. You smile. Miss Bartlett joins you, carrying a clipboard and a pair of headphones shaped like seashells. Time for your sound matching assessment, Jay says, handing them over. Let's see how well your ears remember things they never heard. The test is simple. You're played a sound, say, the creak of a Victorian reading chair. You must find its match among the shelves. You begin confidently. The chair's creak is stored under asterisk elderly upholstery, slightly indignant. A wind chime tone sends you to a jar labeled Hope, held briefly. Asterisk 1 jar is stubbornly hard to place. The sound is like distant laughter, echoing across a frozen pond. You finally find its match in the children's section of the hall. Asterisk snowball fight, joyfully unsupervised. Asterisk Miss Bartlett nods, impressed. Most people confuse that with icy sarcasm from a schoolmaster. Common mistake. As you explore deeper, you encounter the sound sorting desk, a low wooden station with brass tubes and a drawer labeled asterisk, do not panic. Asterisk here. You're asked to create a new sound jar of your own. You're given a small bell, a feather, and a rubber stamp that smells like eucalyptus. You close your eyes, think about what comfort feels like, and gently tap the tools together. Out comes a sound like a sigh disguised as a page turn. You name it. Asterisk, asterisk, almost remembering a poem. Asterisk, asterisk, the jar seals itself with a satisfying pop. You feel oddly proud. Historians rarely speak of preserved sounds. But there's at least one dusty ledger that mentions an archive of auditory ephemera, likely dismissed as metaphor or wishful hearing. But here, sounds are stored like memories, too fragile for air. Miss Bartlett takes you into the final room of the hall, the echo chamber. It's lined with plush walls and has a long bench that feels like it was made to hear things you forgot were inside you. You sit, and she hands you a final jar, unlabeled. Every librarian has one, she says. It plays when it's ready. You unseal it, at first, nothing. Then, gently, a shuffle of familiar footsteps, a laugh you can't quite place. The distant sound of your own voice saying something kind. The air shifts, heavier but warmer. Like the past stopped in to say it's doing just fine. The room holds the sound for a few seconds. Then silence again. Miss Bartlett doesn't ask what you heard. She just takes the jar, labels it with your name, and places it high on the shelf behind her. Sometimes, she says, we don't file sounds. They file us. Bit a suggestion owl hoots softly from your pocket. You swear it just whispered. That'll echo nicely. Back in the main library, everything sounds a little sharper. The clink of your teacup, the rustle of old paper, even the creak of your chair. It's as if the world remembered its voice and invited you to listen. Your notebook flutters open. In your lap. A fresh haiku, greater than sound never vanished, greater than just curled up somewhere quiet, greater than dreaming. Its next line, you cap your pen. Somewhere down the hallway, a jar laughs once and goes still. The fire alarm goes off in the least alarming way possible. It's not a shrill bell or blaring siren, it's a polite, rhythmic tapping, like someone lightly drumming on porcelain with a pencil. You look up from your cataloging notes, and Miss Bartlett appears in the doorway holding a tray of lemon biscuits and a small metal key. No fire, she says calmly. It's the annual anti-flame inspection. We just like to keep our matches on their toes. She gestures for you to follow. Today, you'll be touring the library's most flammable secrets, though, in this place. That mostly means paper with a flair for drama. You trail her down a narrow spiral staircase behind the fiction section. It smells of toasted ink and something faintly stimuli-like. Though no one has confirmed why, at the bottom is a door made of fireproof glass and reinforced optimism. It reads, Controlled Combustion and Historical Heat. Archive F. Inside, it's surprisingly cozy-like. An old reading room that forgot to panic. Wall sconces give off a gentle golden glow. The shelves are lined with fire-resistant manuscripts, many of them marked with warning labels, like asterisk, asterisk handle with gloves. Spontaneous metaphors possible. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Volume the 3rd of May, smolder, when read aloud, asterisk, asterisk. Absolutely do not iron. You begin your inspection near a display labeled asterisk, notable literary fires, mostly avoided. Asterisk, there's a first edition of a 17th century opera libretto that once tried to combust itself out of embarrassment. The story goes that the soprano was so flat during the premiere, the score curled into a tiny musical scroll and smoldered in. Protest. Next to it, a cookbook from 1820 called Asterisk Roasts to Woo By. Asterisk, whose margins are singed not from fire, but from a love triangle involving a roasted pear and a distracted footman. Miss A. Bartlett shows you a contraption called the Ember Cabinet. It's where warm pages are stored, books written in such emotional intensity. The ink never quite dries. When opened, they give off a gentle glow, like a remembered blush. You lift one cautiously. A diary from a Zulu herbalist written during a long, dry summer. The pages still carry heat from the sun and faint traces of spice and soil. Inside are notes on healing rituals, midnight blooming flowers, and dreams translated into recipes. One passage simply reads, "Greater than if the leaf curls clockwise, it's ready. If counterclockwise, sing to it first, you pause." No one ever taught you leaf etiquette. You hum quietly. Just in case, in the far corner of the room is the anti-flame alcove, a whimsical name for a very serious function. It houses the library's emergency response system, a cloud of sentient fog, trained to smother dangerous ideas. It's called Phyllis. Phyllis lives in a large glass dome filled with mist. She's temperamental, fond of jazz, and will only activate if you compliment her weekly. You wave politely. The mist forms what looks like a curtsy. Good sign. Your inspection continues through a series of cabinets containing asterisk inflammatory speeches, overly dramatic poetry, and books that think they're cursed. You run your fingers along the spines, feeling their slight warmth. Historians love to talk about the burning of libraries Alexandria, Sarajevo, Berlin, but few ever mention the ones that burned without flames, the ones that caught fire in someone's heart, or set imagination alight, or simply refused to be read calmly. Miss Bartlett hands you a tongs and gestures toward a locked drawer labeled asterisk, asterisk, for when the narrative gets too hot. Asterisk, asterisk. Inside is a copy of a novella from 1912, handwritten by a woman who claimed to remember her past lives, then wrote them all in iambic hexameter. The pages glow faintly. The binding is lined with rose gold and reinforced size. You crack it open. Ah! Burst of warm air greets you, carrying the scent of cloves and unfinished conversations. The story begins mid-sentence. The characters already know who you are. You close it quickly. Too soon, says Miss Bartlett, placing it gently back into its padded envelope. You return to your desk with a small stack of safe to read, but still simmering materials. Among them, a scroll from a traveling monk who recorded dreams of fiery phoenixes, a play that claims it wrote itself while the author napped, and a children's book titled asterisk, Why Dragons Never Check Out Books But Sometimes Return Them, asterisk. Your fingers are still warm from the pages. Your notebook, sensing your mood, opens to a fresh page and offers this haiku. Greater than asterisk, some pages ignite, greater than not with flame. But with longing greater than story, strikes the match asterisk as you sip your cooling tea. The suggestion owl rustles in your pocket and says quietly, check the margins of that last one. There's a pun that needs airing out. You smile. All around you, the air seems to shimmer just slightly, as if every word in the library had briefly remembered what it felt like to burn with joy, with meaning, with quiet, steady heat. The forecast today calls for medium mist with a chance of misplaced sentries. Miss Bartlett meets you at the garden door, wearing a rain bonnet shaped like a typewriter, ribbon, and a cape that smells faintly of camphor and hard candy. She's holding a watering can and a puzzled expression. Time to check the temporal garden, she says. It's been blooming oddly again. You follow her through a stone archway, etched with vaguely Roman numerals and half-finished proverbs. The arch hums gently as you pass under, and the air changes. The temporal garden is where the library keeps its more confused ears. Rows of plants sprout from raised beds made of retired encyclopedia bindings. Each plant is labeled not with species names, but with time periods. BC 400 Confucian variant asterisk, 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 Tudor spring lettuce talks back. Asterisk, 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 Napoleonic basil, ambitious, asterisk, 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 1953 rhubarb, post-war bitterness. Asterisk, the soil smells of ink and lavender. Bees hum politely. A small sundial ticks in reverse. You crouch near a patch labeled asterisk, 13th century Mongolian thyme. It's spicy, fleet-footed, and seems to replant itself when you're not looking. Miss Bartlett warns that it once tried to annex a nearby patch of 17th century radishes. Negotiations are ongoing. Next to it grows a vine of asterisk Andean memory beans. Asterisk, which only flower if you forget something important. You accidentally think too hard about your to-do list, and the vine instantly bursts into pale pink blossoms. You feel oddly relieved. The real reason for your visit today is a sudden bloom of asterisk interwar dandelions. They're not supposed to grow this far from the periodical section. Their appearance suggests the garden is drifting, a gentle term the librarians use for when time gets nosy. Drifting isn't dangerous, just inconvenient. For example, one year the garden kept trying to be 1859. Every plant insisted on growing in Darwinian spirals and quoting Charles Dickens. You help Miss Bartlett examine a hedge of 8th century Japanese camellias. Their petals carry haiku from unnamed monks. One reads, "Greater than wind through cedar eaves, centuries and every gust, greater than still, no umbrella, ha," says Miss Bartlett. Timeless wit. You hear a rustle near the greenhouse. Doubt waddles the chronotortoise, the unofficial garden supervisor. His shell is etched with timelines and minor inaccuracies. He's wearing a monocle and dragging a tiny cart labeled compost of forgotten eras. He nods solemnly at you. His expression says, "Did you water 1734 yet?" You didn't. He sighs and slowly turns to handle it himself. As you explore the greenhouse, you come upon a vine labeled asterisk medieval memory grapes. Asterisk, each one is infused with a moment, usually minor ones, like a cook humming near a hearth, or a knight struggling with a stubborn buckle. You pop one into your mouth. For an instant, you're inside a sunlit kitchen, feeling the warmth of bread baking and the slight sting of a wooden spoon gently rapping your knuckles for trying to sneak a slice. It tastes like rosemary flower and affectionate scolding. You sit down on a stone bench shaped like a misremembered hourglass. Why do we keep a thyme garden? You ask. Miss Bartlett replies, because some parts of history grow better in the soil, especially the parts too shy to make it into textbooks. She shows you a fenced-off patch labeled asterisk thyme that never quite happened. It's filled with speculative sprouts, failed inventions, abandoned futures, alternate alphabets, and one particularly melodramatic vine claiming to be Julius Caesar's unfinished novel. It's mostly adjectives. Historians still wonder if places like this once existed gardens of historical drift, where memories settled into roots and seasons formed out of forgotten dates. There are scraps of lore that speak of living calendars and century trees, but academia generally writes those off as metaphor. Still, Miss Bartlett has a pocket full of pruning shears, named after historians who disagreed, as clouds drift overhead in reverse. At the moment, you help harvest a small basket of ancient Greek chamomile, which smells like logic and sea spray. It will be steeped into tea for the librarians tonight. Though it's known to make people dream in perfect syllogisms, you pause at the gate before leaving. A single bloom catches your eye, a delicate white flower labeled asterisk, the year your grandmother first danced. You have no idea what it's doing here, but it smells of warmth and rain-soaked records. The suggestion owl flutters down beside you, holding a leaf in its beak that reads, "Plant something now. History will catch up." You tuck the note into your pocket as you leave the garden. The sundial chirps once and spins forward. Time, apparently, has had enough tea and is ready to behave again. It's filing day. The carts are sulking again. You enter the sorting corridor and find half the trolley. Brigade lined up like grumpy footmen in a drawing room mystery. One has draped itself in a tartan shawl and is refusing to move unless someone compliments its wheels. Don't engage, Miss Bartlett advises. Just bribe them with bookmarks. You fish a handful of velvet-edged bookmarks from your pocket and begin the negotiation. Filing day is when the backlog of returned books finally goes back where it belongs, or at least near where it belongs, adjusted for temperament, foot traffic, and historical relevance. You've filed books before, of course, but today you're in charge of cross-temporal reclassification, a glamorous title for putting weird books in even weirder places. The first book on your list is 17 Uses for Athenian Olive Oil Most Legal, which apparently spent last night in the Lost and Found, arguing with a compass and a ghost key. You assign it to the Unexpected Economies wing, where it will likely make friends with a biography of Peruvian potato smugglers and an Ottoman ledger, written entirely in flirtatious haiku. As you push your squeaky cart down the winding corridor, you pass through familiar library neighborhoods, historical gossip featuring who poisoned who, allegedly accidental poetry letters written by candlelight during power outages, sensible sandals, footwear of the ancient world, regrettable maps. The books hum softly on the shelves, adjusting their titles depending on your angle. Some flirt, some sulk. One copy of early Etruscan etiquette gently nudges itself off the shelf and lands at your feet. You pick it up and pat its spine reassuringly. Down a hallway lined with portraits of disapproving catalogers, you find the scent-based filing system. This is your domain. You sniff the next volume, Harlem Jazz Cafes, recipes, and riffs, and get notes of cinnamon, ink, and the faint brass of a trumpet solo echoing through the dust. Perfect for the edible soundtracks shelf, wedged between Cuban cocktails that dance and the spaghetti swing, Italy's unexpected music boom. The air shifts as you round the corner into the tactile indexer room, where everything is filed by texture. Smooth spines, rough bindings, pages that crinkle like autumn leaves. You pause beside a velvet-bound pamphlet titled The Feel of Rain, on 18th century shoulders, still slightly damp, though pleasantly so. Filing is about vibes, dear, says Miss Bartlett, who appears with a clipboard and a thermos labeled emergency tea. Sometimes a book isn't shelved where it makes sense. It's shelved where it feels right. That's the rule here. Don't file by logic. File by emotion, memory, and occasionally astrological compatibility. One entire alcove is organized by books that feel like Tuesday evenings. Another shelf exists solely for volumes that would get along well at a polite dinner party, but only if someone brought pickled pears. You pause with a curious-looking volume called Asterisk Zulu Healers and the Color of Memory. Its cover is stitched in leather and barcloth, and the title glows faintly. Opening it releases the earthy scent of riverbanks and laughter. The stories inside are soft and precise descriptions of healing rituals, seasonal rhythms, and names past. Down in Water and Wind, one passage reads, "The children carried stones to remember dreams. The heavier the stone, the better the tale." You hold the book a little longer than strictly necessary, then gently place it beside Asterisk Whispered Remedies from the Yoruba Grove, both resting beneath a carved wooden sign. Wisdoms that refuse to rush. Asterisk, you glance at your cart. Only a few books remain. There's a slim manual titled Asterisk, How to Politely Decline a Dual 1704 Edition. Asterisk, which obviously belongs in conflict resolution, dramatic. Right beside it, a faded booklet titled Asterisk, The Smell of Lost Paris, Cobblestones and Custard. You press it to your nose and get almond, smoke, and the soft ache of forgetting where you put your gloves. It practically files itself. Historians still debate whether sensory cataloging is valid scholarship or just a librarian's fever dream. But most agree, memory doesn't sort itself alphabetically, and neither do we. You finish shelving the final volume, a Spanish cookbook that translates its recipes as poetry, just as the lights flicker in that friendly bedtime kind of way. The suggestion owl peeks down from the rafters and drops a note that reads, "File yourself under." Content. Possibly a little dusty, but content. You take a seat on the bench near the books with secrets in the margins section. The corridor feels unusually warm tonight, like the pages themselves are offering a small, quiet round of applause. Behind you, one of the carts clears its throat politely and mutters, "Nice work." You bow just slightly, then sip from the thermos of emergency tea, which tastes of peppermint and stories you haven't heard yet. It's filing day. The carts are sulking again. You enter the sorting corridor and find half the trolley brigade lined up like grumpy footmen in a drawing room mystery. One has draped itself in a tartan shawl and is refusing to move unless someone compliments its wheels. Don't engage, Miss Bartlett advises. Just bribe them with bookmarks. You fish a handful of velvet-edged bookmarks from your pocket and begin the negotiation. Filing day is when the backlog of returned books finally goes back where it belongs, at least near where it belongs, adjusted for temperament, foot traffic, and historical relevance. You've filed books before, of course, but today you're in charge of cross-temporal reclassification, a glamorous title for putting weird books in even weirder places. The first book on your list is 17 Uses for Athenian Olive Oil Most Legal, which apparently spent last night in the Lost and Found, arguing with a compass and a ghost key. You assign it to the unexpected economies wing, where it will likely make friends with a biography of Peruvian potato smugglers and an Ottoman ledger, written entirely in flirtatious haiku, as you push your squeaky cart down the winding corridor. You pass through familiar library neighborhoods, historical gossip featuring who poisoned who, allegedly accidental poetry letters written by candlelight during power outages, sensible sandals, footwear of the ancient world, regrettable maps. The books hum softly on the shelves, adjusting their titles depending on your angle. Some flirt, some sulk. One copy of early Etruscan etiquette gently nudges itself off the shelf and lands at your feet. You pick it up and pat its spine reassuringly. Down a hallway lined with portraits of disapproving catalogers, you find the scent-based filing system. This is your domain. You sniff the next volume, Harlem Jazz, cafes, recipes, and riffs, and get notes of cinnamon, ink, and the faint brass of a trumpet solo echoing through the dust. Perfect for the edible soundtrack shelf wedged between Cuban cocktails that dance and the spaghetti swing, Italy's unexpected music boom. The air shifts as you round the corner into the tactile indexer room, where everything is filed by texture. Smooth spines, rough bindings, pages that crinkle like autumn leaves. You pause beside a velvet-bound pamphlet titled The Feel of Rain. On 18th century shoulders, it's still slightly damp, though pleasantly so. Filing is about vibes, dear, says Miss Bartlett, who appears with a clipboard and a thermos labeled emergency tea. Sometimes a book isn't shelved where it makes sense. It's shelved where it feels right. That's the rule here. Don't file by logic. File by emotion, memory, and occasionally astrological compatibility. One entire alcove is organized by books that feel like Tuesday evenings. Another shelf exists solely for volumes that would get along well at a polite dinner party, but only if someone brought pickled pears. You pause with a curious-looking volume called Asterisk Zulu Healers and the Color of Memory. Its cover is stitched in leather and bark cloth, and the title glows faintly. Opening it releases the earthy scent of riverbanks and laughter. The stories inside are soft and precise descriptions of healing rituals, seasonal rhythms, and names past. Down in Water and Wind, one passage reads, "The children carried stones to remember dreams. The heavier the stone, the better the tale." You hold the book a little longer than strictly necessary, then gently place it beside asterisk whispered remedies from the Yorba Grove, both resting beneath a carved wooden sign, wisdoms that refuse to rush. Asterisk, you glance at your cart. Only a few books remain. There's a slim manual titled asterisk, How to Politely Decline a Dual 1704 Edition. Asterisk, which obviously belongs in conflict resolution, dramatic. Right beside it, a faded booklet titled asterisk, The Smell of Lost Paris. Cobblestones and custard. You press it to your nose and get almond, smoke, and the soft ache of forgetting where you put your gloves. It practically files itself. Historians still debates whether sensory cataloging is valid scholarship or just a librarian's fever dream. But most agree, memory doesn't sort itself alphabetically, and neither do we. You finish shelving the final volume, a Spanish cookbook that translates its recipes as poetry just as the lights flicker in that friendly, bedtime kind of way. The suggestion owl peeks down from the rafters and drops a note that reads, "File yourself under content, possibly a little dusty, but content." You take a seat on the bench near the books with secrets in the margin section. The corridor feels unusually warm. Tonight, like the pages themselves, are offering a small, quiet round of applause. Behind you, one of the carts clears its throat politely and mutters, "Nice work." You bow just slightly, then sip from thaw. Elevator doesn't stop on this floor, which is usually fine except today. That's exactly where you need to go. You and Miss Bartlett are standing in front of a blank wall labeled, "This is not a door." You've brought a trolley filed with misfiled memoirs, one chattering abacus, and a tea kettle full of reluctant dates, both the fruit and the historical kind. All were found wandering the wrong century. Miss Bartlett raps her knuckles 3 times against the wall, then whispers, "Dacia vu," twice stirred. The wall doesn't move, but the wallpaper blinks, slowly done, with a reluctant sigh and a click like an old camera shutter. The wall peels open sideways. You step through into what the librarians politely call the oops wing. Welcome to the repository of temporal accidents, factual hiccups, and biographies of people who maybe didn't exist, but were very convincing about it. The room smells faintly of cinnamon and mystery. Shelves spiral inward like a seashell. There's a faint breeze despite no windows. Somewhere in the distance, a phonograph plays a tune that might be jazz. It might be a weather report. This wing is where the library keeps its most ambiguous artifacts. You pass a shelf of books, all titled "The First Person to Ever," followed by things like "Brew Coffee," "Name a Storm," or "Whistle at Work." Most entries are suspiciously vague. One of them simply says, "Survive a Tuesday." You raise an eyebrow. Miss Bartlett shrugs. A glass case in the center holds a single page of parchment titled "The Forgotten Emperor." The page insists that for exactly 41 minutes in 1673, a man named Gregor, the slightly prepared, ruled a tiny European city-state called Remeldorfia. He passed two decrees, one about public fountains, the other involving mandatory sock drawers. Historians still argue whether Gregor existed. The records supporting him are suspiciously well written and include a recipe for lemon cake in the footnotes. Some claim Gregor was an inside joke among bored scribes. Others believe he was a time traveler who lost his wallet. You reshelve a book titled "How to Be Several People and Still Pay Rent," next to "Unofficial Saints of Subtle Miracles." The Latter contains names like Saint Camilla of Quiet Elevators and Saint Bernard of Lost Buttons. You don't question it. Around the next corner is the room of footnotes, where forgotten citations flutter through the air like moths. They land on your shoulders, gently whispering things like "see also, page 142, or translation, uncertain." Miss Bartlett waves them away with her hat. Here, sensory filing becomes abstract. You sort by intention. Books are placed near others with similar regrets, missed connections, or oddly specific metaphors. For example, the 1911 Goose Incident, a legal misunderstanding. The ship that only sank emotionally letters to a future that forgot me. You find a volume titled Asterisk, the unwritten memoir of a jazz-age librarian. The cover is blank. The pages, too. But it smells like pipe smoke, printer's ink, and midnight bus stations. You shelve it between asterisk echoes in the card catalog and filing in the dark. A personal guide. Near the end of the spiral corridor is a door labeled asterisk pending approval by time. It leads to a narrow stairwell that climbs upward in a slow corkscrew at each landing. There's a single shelf of books no one quite remembers writing, but no one can throw away. These are the narratives with soft edges and uncertain middles. They hum gently as you pass, as if dreaming they are still being read. You shelve your final book, Miscalculated Destinies, The Train. That departed slightly too early asterisks, then turned to Miss Bartlett. Why do we keep these? You ask, she considers the question, then says, because memory is messy, and history, when it's being honest, is more jazz than blueprint. As you head back down the spiral staircase, you spot a small chalkboard hanging by the exit. It reads, "Some things aren't meant to be proven, just remembered fondly." There's a teacup on the final step, still warm, possibly yours. The suggestion owl flies past, carrying a scrap of paper that simply says, "Gregor sends his regards." He liked your socks. You step back through the blinking wall into the safer, more comprehensible wing of Mostly Verified Events, where the furniture doesn't wink at you. The trolley is lighter now. The books are quieter. You exhale, like someone letting go of a particularly eccentric guest, and the phonograph, somewhere deep behind the walls, plays a final soft note that lands on your shoulder like a comma. O's of emergency tea, which tastes of peppermint and stories you haven't heard. You've made it to the top floor, or at least one of the top floors. The elevator didn't say it, just sighed open with a tired ding and a whiff of sandalwood. So you stepped out like it was your idea. Here, in this quiet, upper-level time, behaves like melted chocolate, slow, warm, and slightly sticky. The carpet is plush. The air tastes like old paper and something a little like almonds. The hallways are narrow and lined with softly humming shelves. You've entered Personal Archives, a place where books write themselves about people who never thought they'd be noticed. Ms. Bartlett calls it the Department of Underappreciated Significance. This wing is special. Not famous rulers or landmark inventions, just the soft, overlooked hum of real lives. Your trolley contains a stack of returned books with titles like The Woman Who Knew Exactly When to Leave Parties Letters From, A Lighthouse Keeper's Cat, The Jazz Age Librarian Who Filed Books by Smellia Sewer Book. Returned by a ghostly hand with a very polite note, you wander slowly past shelves that curve like friendly elbows. Some sections are labeled People Who Remember to Water Plants or Quiet Braveries. Each book has its own rhythm. Some pages smell of sun-warmed bricks. Others have the dry, brittle feel of a well-worn habit. You file a slender green volume titled The Seamstress Who Invented Pockets Unofficially Next to Aprons That Hid Entire Revolutions. No one's quite sure how much of these books is true, but truth here is less about fact and more about resonance. memory with a little music to it. You pause beside a shelf marked the long Tuesdays of the 1920s. There's a book, there you recognize, not because you've read it, but because you've dreamed about it once. It's called Polite Resistance: How a Jazz-Age Librarian Delayed a War with Card Catalog Errors. Inside are diagrams of filing cabinets arranged like chessboards, with notes about how realphabetizing the military archive led to someone misplacing an invasion order. Did it happen? Historians still wonder. But you can almost hear the swing band playing in the background, just loud enough to distract a clerk into forgetting what day it was. Down the next hallway, books perch on armchairs instead of shelves. You see, Grandma's cooking advice that defied the British Empire, The Boy Who Fixed Clocks for Fun, then accidentally reinvented time laundry songs of the Andes. Each title feels like a hand on your shoulder, gently pulling you into a story you almost remember. You file a book with a cracked spine titled How to Disappear Nicely. It's handwritten, smells like lemon balm, and hums softly. You place it on a shelf already occupied by volumes like People Who Didn't Say Much, but Thought Deeply, and Moments That Changed Nothing and Everything. Miss Bartlett sits on a low bench beneath a skylight. She's sipping something pale and steamy from a chipped mug labeled Classified. The light filters in like it's been softened by lace. You know, she says, not looking at you. Some say the Jazz-Age Librarian didn't even have a name, just a scent. Bit of sandalwood, bit of ink, bit of whatever it is that makes someone unforgettable without trying. You nod, or you think you do. It's hard to tell whether you're listening, remembering, or drifting into a memory that isn't quite yours. The floor creaks in a friendly, confessional sort of way as you shelve one last volume. Asterisk, Small Joys of 1932, asterisk, inside. It records things like one excellent appelé, good jazz solo under a bad roof, the return of a borrowed book. 5 years late, but forgiven you. Run your finger along the spines as you pass, whispering titles like they're lullabies. Some books lean toward your touch. Others exhale. In the distance, a bell chimes once. It's the library's way of saying, that's enough for today. Miss Bartlett rises with a quiet groan. Let's go before the archives start getting sentimental, she says. Though you suspect she's already tearing up a little, you are too. On your way out, you pass a mirror. It shows you as you were when you first entered the library, then flickers and replaces the image with how you look now, just slightly more serene, with a bit more ink behind the eyes. As the elevator doors close, the shelves hum goodbye, and somewhere too, floors down, maybe 3, the Jazz Librarian's story curls into itself like a cat in a windowsill, satisfied for now. The elevator glides downward with a quiet sigh, as if it too is growing sleepy. The light inside dims to a warm amber, and the buttons no longer list floors-only feelings. You press one labeled Contented Reshelving and trust it'll take you where you need to go. You step out into a gentle hush. The final wing of the library, the lost and found apartment for the marginally misremembered. This is where histories are gently restored or allowed to fade with dignity. The lighting is low, the furniture slightly frayed in the way that makes everything more comfortable. You pass a cozy alcove filled with umbrellas, mismatched gloves, and one extremely suspicious accordion. Miss Bartlett leads the way, her steps barely making a sound on the thick rug patterned with library stamps from around the world. She pauses at a shelf labeled asterisk events that didn't matter, but still deserve a story. You set your trolley beside the reference desk, now empty except for a typewriter with no ribbon and a teacup. Thoughts definitely been here since the 1890s. Someone's left a note that says, back soon, or possibly earlier. Your task here, it's simple. Not to organize, not to research, but to listen. This part of the job isn't about what gets remembered deities, about what gets a moment of attention before drifting quietly into the gentle archives of just nice to think about. You sit in a chair that molds itself kindly to your shape. On your lap is a book with no title. As you open it, a soft breeze turns the pages. There are no words only. The faint smell of popcorn from a forgotten fair. The warmth of sun through a train window. The sound of shoes echoing in a museum you walked through once and never quite forgot, Miss Bartlett has settled nearby with her own book, titled The Footnotes of a Quiet Life. She's humming something tuneless but comforting. Around her, ankles, paper clips slowly orbit like tiny moons. You notice a shelf of items that were never properly documented. A half-written love letter that ends with, "Anyway, the soup was excellent." A child's drawing of someone named Grandpa History riding a unicycle. Recipe for something called thyme scones with ingredients. Like 2 teaspoons of patience and a pinch of almost remembering you shelve a final slim volume. Titled How the Jazz-Age Librarian Fell Asleep at Her Desk and Dreamed of Filing Stars. It hums softly in your hands, then quiets as it finds its place among the rest. Historians still debate whether the jazz librarian really existed, or whether she was invented by tired archivists trying to explain strange scent trails unusually. Well-organized footnotes, and the occasional whisper of swing music in otherwise silent reading rooms. But sitting here, in the still hush of the lost and found department, you know she was real in the way that sleep is real, fleeting, vivid, and strangely necessary. Miss Bartlett gives you a rare, sideways smile. Most people think history is carved in stone, but really, it's scribbled in pencil and smells a little like peppermint. You hear the soft creak of a door behind you. Not urgent, not alarming, just an invitation to wind things down. You gather your things, or perhaps you don't. They'll be here tomorrow, or yesterday, or whenever you return. The library doesn't mind as you step into the soft-lit hallway. You can still hear the faint rustle of pages, the comforting weight of stories both true and gently imagined. And somewhere, deep in the stacks, the jazz librarian adjusts a file, hums a sleepy tune, and drifts into a dream of perfectly labeled stars.